The following is a presentation of the Eagles Sports Network.
Hi again, everybody, and welcome into episode 16 of Mossy Creek Conversations. I'm your host, Michael Watchering, and we have a terrific guest for this one. Two-time All-South Atlantic Conference selection, an all-region pick as a setter, one of the most prolific setters in program history. Former coach as well, Kristen Pickett. Now Kristen Davis. Kristen, thanks for taking some time. Glad we get an opportunity to catch up.
Thank you. I'm so excited.
Let's go way back into the high school playing days. What was your second best sport growing up?
Definitely softball. I played softball all throughout when I was younger. Thought that I could potentially go on to college playing softball, and then I told my parents that I quit and I played volleyball, and then they all cried. We all cried. And then I played volleyball, and somehow it miraculously worked out.
When did you start to get that sense that you had an opportunity to continue your playing days as a volleyball player and into the collegiate level?
So I played club. I started my freshman year playing club, and that's kind of where you get recruited in the volleyball world. I knew nothing about recruiting at all. Really, it was just they came out. I had a few really small coaches come out, and then Shannon Mincy, who was the coach there at the time when I first got there, found me somehow and recruited me, and then gave me a chance to play at Carson-Newman.
You mentioned the club circuit. I think that that's something that is very different from a lot of other sports. Granted, in basketball, there's AAU, and baseball and softball, there's more travel. What is being a volleyball player in high school like, considering the fact that you have your normal high school season and then the travel circuit of the club season?
So usually high school season goes from July is when you start kind of, practicing in the summertime. And then your real season is that fall. And then after that is when club starts, and club goes anywhere from December all the way to June. So that one is more, taxing as far as traveling. And so you're traveling usually all over the U.S. to try and get in these qualifiers where coaches can see you. At that point, we were pretty small. I was from Cleveland, Tennessee. We had one club, and that was it. We traveled to Alabama, and Orlando was the farthest. And then other than that, we didn't travel that much. But now it is huge, the club scene is. And so it's only growing. I think volleyball is one of the number one growing junior sports in all of the U.S. And so it's super exciting to be a part of that and see where it's come when I first started as now that I am coaching as well in club.
When you get the opportunity to start to get recruiting, other than Carson-Newman, what other schools were you considering?
Oof, I don't even, to be honest, I don't remember. I was one of those that I don't think a lot of coaches liked me when I was playing, because Rachel Harper, who is my teammate, so they'd have Tusculum and Shorter and all these coaches coming to watch it. And I was like, hey guys, what's up? And then somehow I got recruited. And I think I just didn't hit my peak till I was older, where they were really good at a young age. And I don't think I fully understood. And so I'm lucky to have gotten recruited and then somewhat excelled at the college level. But it's just funny because I don't remember, to be completely honest.
So it's basically Carson-Newman potentially or bust for you back then. So when you do get the opportunity to commit to Carson-Newman, you mentioned Rachel Harper, a teammate of yours, not only in high school, but then for 4 years at Mossy Creek. What do you remember about some of your first days on a college campus?
The biggest thing, I did visit a couple more schools, but the biggest thing I felt as soon as I came onto campus was it felt home. I felt at peace. And that's what I tell as a college coach. That's what I used to tell my girls. It's hey, if you want to commit here, it's all about the feeling. And if you feel comfortable, if you feel at home, that's the place for you. And so I can't even explain it. Those are the only words I know how. And after that, I was the first visit, I think I came on 2 or 3 visits. And after the first visit, I was that's where I want to go. And so then ever since then, I was that was my number one.
And then you get here, and as a setter, you get an opportunity to work with some great players throughout your entire time. But your first year 2, you run the 6-2, so that means a 2 setter setup versus the 5-1, where you're the only setter on the floor and you never come off the floor. How challenging was that for you to be in a system like that where you're not on the floor the entire time in all 6 rotations?
So I had played a 6'2" in club, so I was used to that. I mean, I'm obviously, if you know me, I'm not that tall. I'm like 5'7", so I'm one of the shorter out of the volleyball team in general. So I never expected to play all the way around. I never really expected to play coming in my freshman and sophomore year. And I remember specifically, so Courtney Lawson, she was a year ahead of me. She played at the same club that I did, and she was a setter as well. And I actually committed before her. She was a late commit. And so now I came in, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to play. Like, she's in front of me she was so good in club. And so I was like, this is great. Like, what am I going to do? Things like that. And then somehow I got the opportunity to play 6'2". I know she suffered with shin splints and things like that, and then ended up just not playing anymore. And so really it was an awesome opportunity just to even have the chance, and then realize, okay, I can do this. And so then I just tried to work my butt off to try and keep staying on the court, however that meant.
I don't want to spend too much time on any particular match that you lost, but this is a little foreshadowing to what I want to get into in a little bit. At the end of your freshman season, you're in the South Atlantic Conference tournament, taking on a Wingate team that's 27-0. Hadn't lost a conference tournament match in a few years, just absolutely dominant all year long. You take them to 5 sets. What do you remember about that day?
I do remember that. And I think as a freshman, you're just so naive. You don't fully understand or comprehend how the conference works, who the best teams are. Yes, you're told that. But my freshman year, I'm just like, oh my gosh, these are a really good team. And I remember specifically, they had this right side. All she would do is run slides. And I can't even tell you her hitting percentage. It had to be above 500. And so I just remember there's like in that specific game, I had like 2 or 3 digs in the same rally of her. And I'm like, yes, I conquered it. But then we ended up losing and it was really sad. But I do remember that game and just the right side. That's all I remember.
So the next 2 seasons, a little challenging, but you guys continue to grow as a team. And then entering your senior year, 3 years, you mentioned you get recruited by Shannon Mincy. And then entering your senior year, there's a coaching change that takes place. What happened within the group as a team, knowing that the person that you committed to and wanted to play for 3 seasons, or for your entire career that you had played for, you personally for 3 seasons, was leaving, and then there was this unknown of a new person that was going to take the job? What was that experience like?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of mixed emotions at that point. You're a junior, you're somewhat established in where you've been playing. I mean, you kind of know the conference, things like that. And then all of a sudden, everything changes. So at that point, a new coach comes in. Are they going to want to play the freshmen? Because they don't care about the seniors. They want to grow the freshmen and be better on later on, as opposed to being good now, which we didn't know at the time what was going to happen. And so I think Dan coming in was probably the best situation, just because he brought a new, sort of energy and a belief in us that we were like, okay, we can do this, because before we thought we could, we just somehow couldn't cross that threshold. And so with Dan coming in, it just completely wiped all expectations. No one knew anything. And we just went out and we played volleyball. And so, I mean, that was the best thing about it, is that he didn't know the other team. So, I mean, our scouting reports were in depth, but at the same time, he was like, hey, every team is the same team. Doesn't matter if it's Wingate or if it's, whoever on the other side, we're playing them to the fullest no matter what. And I think just that different mentality that he brought completely changed the culture around. And it was really fun to be a part of. And I say still to this day, he's probably one of the best, if not the best coach that I've ever played for.
Well, not only do you guys change culture and change some of the things that happen within the program, but you start the year on a completely different coast, 3 time zones away in San Francisco to begin the year. What do you remember about that trip?
So I laugh because the funniest thing is, at this point in our career, me and Rachel Harper's career, we had never won a 5-set match. I mean, maybe we won like 1 or 2, but in 3 years we hadn't won many. And so I remember that trip. We were like winning these games and they're good teams. And I'm like, what is happening? And then we come to this one, I think it was our either first or second game when we're there. We beat a team in 5, and me and Rachel are just bawling, crying, like holding each other after the game because we've never won in 5. whatever. We probably did. I don't remember. But it's just funny because Dan was like, what are you doing? And we're like, you have no idea. We've never won in 5. And so then like that kind of set the precedent for the rest of the year. And so at that point we were like, we are good enough. And so we were able to compete. I think that gave us that little boost in the beginning of the season so that we were able to be more successful later on.
Not just on the floor, but I felt like off the floor as well. It was a great decision by Dan to take you guys out of the state, because I think I was on that trip with you guys, and there were a few of you that had never been on a plane, never left, never really traveled, anything like that. So this was now an opportunity where you guys had to come together as a team. How much did that entire weekend set the tone for the rest of the year?
Yeah, I think just the experiences that being in a different state across the country literally brings, as far as the flying, the traveling, the riding in minivans when we got there. I can't tell you how many times we ate Subway. And so we bonded over, okay, we're done eating Subway for this trip, but yet we weren't. We ate more Subway. Like little things like that. It was just like we could laugh it off, and it was just us. It wasn't like we had, I think we might have had a few family members that came, but otherwise, like we were our cheerleaders. We were our bench was louder than, the fans that were at the game. And so again, that just set the precedent and was allowed us to be the best we could starting off. And then once we realized, okay, we can maybe win, then we just kept going.
You guys had a great overall season, but you only started the year 4-3. You end the year 23-4 the rest of the way. When did you get a little bit of a sense that first weekend where you won your first 3 matches against really good teams wasn't a fluke, wasn't just some new car that was, you were excited in it, that this team had a chance to knock on the door of one of the top spots in the league?
Yeah, if I remember correctly, our first opening match, I think, was Tusculum, and we swept them in 3. And that was like that was another just reassurance of like, we are good enough. And then we went away to a tournament. I think we played like UNC Pembroke, and I can't even remember, but there was 3 teams, and we played so terrible. Like, I can't even explain to you. There was nothing we could do. Everyone played, the whole bench played. We were all terrible. And so the coolest thing, and that I still carried on with me as a college coach, was Dan, after that weekend, literally he got the tapes, and as we were in the parking lot, we drove home, we drove all night, we were sleeping, whatever. We're in the parking lot, and he's like ripping up the CDs, and he's like, hey, that is not us. He's like, I'm not even going to look at it. We're not even going to watch it. We're not going to learn about it. We're literally just going to move on. And so I think by not reliving it and him knowing, okay, we're better than this, and him just directing that allowed us to like, okay, get over that little hump that we had and allowed us to keep going. Because as a college coach, I've done the same thing. We're like, wow, we're all bad. Like we can all say we're all bad, but like, it doesn't matter. Stats don't matter that game. Film doesn't matter. And let's just move on. And that's what we did.
You guys do move on, and you end up having a wonderful season. I'd say it's the highlight of the year, even though you guys did go on eventually to win an NCAA tournament match, came in November against Wingate. Maybe one of the best matches that this program has ever had. About a month before, there was a lot of hype, a lot of excitement. Wingate coming to town. Looks like your team has a chance to get over that hump, maybe compete for a regular season title. They come in here and they sweep you. You guys are in and out, and probably thinking to yourself, wow, we got a lot of work to do. And then you go to their place. They're 7th in the country at the time. They'd won 55 consecutive South Atlantic Conference tournament matches. What do you remember about the preparation leading up to that week?
So the funny thing is, I do not remember getting swept at home by Wingate before that. Don't remember at all, which I guess is a good thing. But I guess at that point, like going into it, we were like, we have nothing to lose. Like, I mean, we didn't expect to go in there and win, but we were like, hey, we're going to play our hardest and we're going to see what happens. Because again, I don't remember the 3-sweep loss, but I think what I do specifically remember about that game was right before we go out, we all kind of like, girls we have our dance parties or whatever it is to like get all excited for the game. But that game specifically, I remember we all sat there and we were just silent. Like, I mean, I couldn't remember a time where we've ever done this before. And it was like, we were so focused on the task at hand that we were about to do. I'll never forget that moment, because I looked back, and then afterward, I remember after 5, we're in there. I have a video, I think, on my Instagram of us screaming and twirling our shirts, and after we won. But right before the game, it was just silence, and we were so focused on what we had to do. And that was just a cool moment that I'll never forget.
How would you describe what it was like throughout that match? Because obviously now it's years down the road. You're not going to remember every single match that you had. But I'm sure at that time, after your first 3 years, after the losses to Wingate, I mentioned that 1 in 5 sets, and you mentioned the fact that you couldn't get over that hump in 5 sets. How would you describe what it was like as a team on the bench throughout that entire match, knowing that you're knocking on the door of beating a team that never loses on their home floor, with an opportunity to do it, and something that you haven't really been able to do to turn that corner and really solidify yourselves as one of the best teams in the region?
Yeah, it's funny because I can't tell you how many times I've rewatched that match. Like, it's downloaded on my computer to this day. I haven't watched it probably in a year or two, but afterward, years after, I would go back and watch it just to relive that moment. That's what everyone's always chasing once they're done with college athletics, is like that high, that moment. And that was it for us. I think during the match, it kind of was like we realized that we were going point for point with them. And then all of a sudden, point for point, it was 20, 21 or 22, whatever it was. And we're still right there. And so I think with that, we were like, okay, all right. You know what I mean? It was kind of like we were like, we can hang. Whatever happened the 3 sets before where we lost all of them straight, we were hanging throughout the games, is what it felt like to me. And then I remember to this day, it was 14-13. I think Tina went to serve in the last point. And then we serve it, they run a slide and hit it in the net. And then I just remember that moment where me and, again, Rachel probably are falling to our knees, like crying, so excited. I remember parents were crying. I mean, it was just it was the highest of highs that I have ever experienced in college athletics. And I will never, ever forget it. And I loved every minute of it.
Is it safe to say that that's the highlight of your athletic career?
Yeah, I'd say that, and obviously winning the first round and 3 to the NCAA tournament, because that was not expected at all. So those two, but I think Wingate, knowing our background, knowing their past, they were 7th in the country. They hadn't lost a game. How many years is that? I know you said 54 and something.
I think it was 2.5, two and change, somewhere in that area.
Yeah, so they hadn't lost in conference in 2.5 years. Like, that's insane. And so all of that, I think, made it more emotional in the sense of what an accomplishment that felt like. And then we just kept going, and we were just living on the high, even at the end of the season. It was awesome.
I guess a question that I would ask in that sense, we talked about the changeover from a new coach to a different coach. Well, for you as a player, typically once you got into November, I don't want to say that you were playing meaningless matches, but the thought of playing for championships for an NCAA tournament berth hadn't really been there your first 3 years. What was it like having a change in mindset going into November, late November, knowing that now you have to wait on Wednesday afternoons for the NCAA regional rankings? Are we ranked? Are we going to get to the tournament? What's our SAC seed going to be? Are we going to be able to host? And then are we going to be able to have a good draw to potentially get to a title? What kind of change in mindset does that take as a player there in your senior year?
If I remember correctly, I think Dan's word for us, and it was kind of like our motto that whole year, was respect. And so no teams respected us and who we were because of our past and what those seasons had been like. And so I think we made this board that like spelled out the words respect, and it was like the games that were coming up. So it was like LR and then Anderson, and so we would like tick off all the people that we had beat in order to earn that respect. And so really each game we went into, it was more of like hey, we're going to show you, because we haven't been able to show you in past years, but this is a different team. It's a different program, and we are coming, kind of to take it, as they say, or whatever. And so that's kind of the biggest thing, is that we wanted teams to respect us. Regardless if we won or lost, we knew that we were going to be a force to be reckoned with. And so that was kind of our motivating factor throughout the season.
What do you remember about the selection show when you guys see your name pop up on that screen that you're going to an NCAA tournament?
It's funny because there's not a lot of memories in that. I remember sitting in our locker room, and I think at one point, like we saw it, and then my head went in someone's lap because we were just celebrating and crying. We cried a lot, apparently. Oh my gosh!
Seemingly, yeah.
Something's wrong with us. But I mean, it's just to see the season play out that it did, and have been there for 3 years before, and knowing that we never had a chance, and then that senior year. I mean, that's all you can ask for, to see your name up on that screen as they're calling the roll.
So you make it into the NCAA tournament. You get an opportunity to play for a region championship, and as you would expect, you head back over to Cuddy Arena at Wingate. You get a practice the day before. Does it ever hit you along that bus ride, along that practice, that your career is down to the final couple matches, and the next time you hit the hardwood might be that last time that you get an opportunity to play?
Yes and no. Yes, in the sense of people remind you, and they're like, this could be the last, or whatever it is, and you're thinking of that. But you truly never know until you're actually done what that felt like. And so that's what I always tell my girls as a coach, like, you will never, ever get this back. So live in this moment right now. And I wish I could go back and probably tell myself to live in that moment a little bit more. I think that I did at that point, but looking back now, I could have done better, and kind of just really taking it in right before you step on the court. Because that's the butterflies in your stomach. That's what you live for in this world. And we don't get that anymore. Now that you're done with a college program, you're kind of like, how do I find that? And, like rec leagues for adults is not the same at all. But yeah.
You get to the tournament and you play USC Aiken, and I think I should have done my homework and I failed here. I think they had the Region Player of the Year that season. I think that she was one of the best. I think she ended up becoming an All-American, and you go in and sweep them. As great as that moment was against Wingate a few weeks earlier, how great was this moment to win an NCAA tournament match, not just win it, but sweep it?
Yeah, to go in, we didn't know what to expect. Yes, we'd done film and we've scouted them and things like that, but we'd never played them before because they're in our region, not in our conference. So going into that match, I mean, again, it was more of like, we have something to prove and we're going to see if it works out. And so they did have, you're right, they had like the player of the year or whatever, and she was an All-American. It was their right side. The coolest thing, not the cool thing, it's sad for her, but how we won on the last point was her hitting the ball out. And so it was kind of just like I don't know if that's mean, but like ha, like we beat you and you have the best player on your team. You know what I mean? Kind of like all in one. And that's what I remember specifically from that game.
You earned that respect, obviously, by the end by beating one of the better teams in the region at that point. You end up falling to Armstrong State in the next round, but you're one of the final 32 teams playing in the entire country by the time that your career comes to an end. How would you describe what your 4 years of playing college volleyball at Carson-Newman was like?
Oh, I can't even explain it. The biggest thing, so I have to say this story because it's kind of funny. So right after we beat USC Aiken, going into Armstrong, I remember, I don't even think we did film or scouting or anything like that, but I remember Dan, like I went up to Dan at one point and I was like, all right, so like, what do we need to do? What do you think? And he was like, Pickett. And that's what he called me. He was like, I'm gonna be honest with you. He's like, they are bigger, they are faster, and they are stronger. And that's all he said. And I was like, okay, but like, what are we going to do? He's like, I'm just going to tell you, they're bigger and they're faster and they're stronger. I was like, okay, so we need to like shut down their outside, whatever. And so it was just funny because I think at that moment, like they were a better team than us, no doubt. Maybe we could have played better. We would have had to play the best game of our lives. They would have had to play a bad game. And so it was just kind of like yes, it hurt to lose, but at the same time, looking back, we knew what we had already done. And like, we were so proud of ourselves. And of course you want to keep playing, you want to keep doing that, but we had achieved everything that we wanted to, or even imagine that we could have. And so just to be in that moment and being able to play and put your jersey on one more time is all you can ask for as an athlete.
You went through those 4 years with Rachel Harper and Lauren Santarelli, both multiple-time all-conference selections. Lauren dealt with injuries. Jenna Wilson joins the party for your guys' senior year, her only year of eligibility here. What was the ride like with specifically Lauren and Rachel, but then also getting Jenna there as well to go through that final season where you win nearly 30 matches and you win an NCAA tournament match?
Still to this day, having Lauren and Rachel, which I call her Harper, so I know it gets confusing. And now she's a Sakira, so it's not even any of those names. But it's just that is a lifelong friendship that I will never lose with Lauren and Rachel both together. And we're actually, it's funny, we all live in Texas now. So we kind of like tend to meet up. I think I just met with Rachel. I was in Plano. And so just that relationship is the coolest thing that came from those 4 years. And that's how we were able to get each other through all of the ups and the downs. And we were there through each other. We all lived together. Even when Jenna came, we were all roommates at one point. And so it's just, I look back and I cherish the friendships that were created based on that, and specifically with Lauren and Rachel. And then Jenna was just an added bonus the last year. I mean, we couldn't have asked for anyone else to step in and, be the person who was able to kind of fill that spot, because she's so funny and she was awesome. And she's like, yeah, we'll do whatever. And, she get up there and she wins like All-American. I think she's our first All-American volleyball player. And so it's just, you can quote me, I don't know if I'm right on that, but it was just a cool experience to be along.
What's something about that team that we may not know?
Oh my gosh. I was not prepared for this one.
Makes it a good question.
The biggest thing that I think that we didn't have that we had my senior year was just how bonded we were, and how we were able to like talk with anyone and everyone about everything. Whereas before it didn't feel that way, or it felt like maybe freshmen and sophomores are against juniors, seniors, stuff like that. Like it was just such a breath of fresh air because it didn't matter. And so we just came together. And I think the bond with that was the coolest thing, which that's cliche, but that's like what I remember wholeheartedly. I mean, Kiana O'Neill could dance really well. I mean, there's little things here and there, but I don't know.
What did Carson-Newman mean to you, not only as an athlete, but as a person?
The biggest thing, like I said, is those lifelong relationships. I mean, it definitely helped me grow my faith, being in that setting, and then allowed me to kind of take that on to different things. And I moved to Michigan, and, people don't think like you in Michigan all the time. And so it allowed me to kind of build that foundation to be able to defend my faith if needed to. But then I go back to just the friendships and the relationships that were built that will never be taken away from that.
Why did you decide to become a coach after you graduated?
It wasn't fully in the plans. It was kind of a way. I was trying to get my master's, and Dan was like, hey, do you want to stay and get your master's? And I was like, yeah, I'll be a GA. And so that's kind of what sparked the interest. And then from there, I fell in love with it, and it allowed me to take my passion and share it with others. And that's what I still to this day, I love. I just want to be a part of a program or some sort of coaching. And so I still am. I went through different schools and stuff like that, and now live in San Antonio, Texas, but I helped out with a Division II school here, and I'm coaching club now. So I think it'll be something that I'm always passionate and always around.
That team goes on to win a region title. When did you, sitting in the coach's chair, sense that team had something a little special that had a door open for them to potentially do something that had never been accomplished in this program's history?
Yeah, it was so cool to be a part of as a coach. But again, I was too young and I don't know. I was almost jealous. I was definitely excited for them, and that aside, but I was also jealous because I was like, this is what I wanted, I wanted this, but I still was a part of it, and I still felt a part of it. But the coolest thing was just being able to see it play through. And it was actually me, Rachel, and Jenna, and Kirby, who were all past players, got to stay and be a part of that program. And so it's just, and Dan kind of said it best in the sense of, you guys started this, and so they need your guidance to take this where we think we can go. And we did end up going that way. So it was cool to be a part of. I look back now, and I was stupid and naive and for being jealous, but I was jealous at the time.
And I think that makes sense. And the way that I've heard it compared in the past is being a college athlete or being an athlete in general is kind of like being a parent. You want to leave it better than you started it. So when you started, you guys started to build the program up, and then it had to get to that next level. And fortunately, you were able to see the fruits of your labor within a year. Some of your former teammates get an opportunity to have that region championship trophy. What's interesting about that season is great start to the year, really good team much of the season, another trip up to Michigan this time around. But you ended the year 5-4, kind of limping into the NCAA tournament. Do you remember anything about being in that setting, going into a regional tournament setting, knowing that your last 10 games or so hadn't quite been up to the standard that you had set at the beginning of the year?
You know, it's funny what your mind remembers and what it doesn't. And that is one thing that I don't really remember. I just remember the highs and the really lows, sometimes, some of them. But I don't remember that, to be completely honest.
Yeah, and then you go into that tournament and you win 3 matches in that tournament. What was the feeling like being on the sideline, seeing that last ball? I think Sarah Fairley was the one that hit it, go to the ground and see the opportunity that you guys were one of the best 8 teams in the country at that point.
Yeah, I mean, at that moment, you don't fully realize everything else. You're so focused on what you've done and who you've competed against. But then you go to that NCAA tournament and there's teams from all over the country that you've never seen that are better, maybe some a lot better, you know? And so just to be able to be in that moment and knowing that you can hang with those teams. And that's what I kind of took on as a college coach as well, is like, I've been here. I've seen what the best of the best is at the Division II level. And like, usually the kids that I would coach, I'd be like, you guys are capable of that. But I would have never known that if I wouldn't have had the opportunity to go to as far as we did that year.
From that season comes to an end. You mentioned you didn't really intend on doing the whole coaching thing. You just wanted the extra degree, but Dan Ayers gets a wonderful opportunity to go to Middle Tennessee State to be the head coach there. Ask you to become an assistant coach. How did that opportunity come about, and what eventually swayed you to leave here and head to Murfreesboro?
I mean, at that point, I didn't have a full direction as far as what I wanted to do. I originally wanted to be in the FBI. I don't know why. I watched TV shows and I liked them, and so I was like, "That's what I'm going to do." And it's not what I ended up doing. And so it was just like a perfect opportunity. And now that I've been in the coaching world for 6 or 7 years now, I realize that does not happen. Like going from playing to being a Division I assistant coach does not happen. Mm-hmm. So I was very thankful for the opportunity because it allowed me to go other places as well. But I just remember being at middle and I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing. I think one of the girls was like my age. I was 22. I think she was 21. And here I am stepping into the role as a full-time assistant, because at that time I was still going to school. So I just remember I was so over my head, but at the same time, I tried to take it all in because I knew that in the future it was going to help me regardless.
How does coaching at the Division I level differ from the D2 level?
If I had a preference, I would coach at Division II all day, every day, only because the community, the kind of the feeling that you get is like you are so supported at the Division II level. And maybe I'm sure there are Division I's that are the same. The one that I was at, it just felt volleyball was here, basketball was here. It was just so individualized. And what I love about Carson-Newman and even the next school that I went on to coach at Northern Michigan, that whole town rallies behind you and is for you and is at your game. And I mean, I still remember, I think when we played Tusculum, I have pictures on my Facebook, but our stands were packed, and you don't get that, or we didn't get that at that mid-major Division I level. And so that's why I love Division II, is like what you can do. You can also have a life outside of coaching or playing as well. You don't have to stay there year round, little things like that. I love the Division II level, and if I continue coaching, Division II is where I would be.
You mentioned that you go to Northern Michigan, 3 years there, one of the most beautiful places in the country for a few months out of the year, and then a whole lot of snow for a good amount of time as well. What led to that opportunity?
So the biggest thing was it's the coaching world is all about who you know and the coaches you know, and they kind of pass your name on and maybe you get it, maybe you don't. And so at that time, I had met Rashinda Reed, who was at the time she was at UAB. Now she's the assistant at Illinois. And so I knew her. She got the job at Northern Michigan and wanted me to come be her assistant. But then she left because she got the job at Illinois, she is there today. And so she passed my name on to the head coach there. And so it was just I went up there and I was like, I am never going to live here. Like, what am I doing? I think it was 12 degrees. I have a picture on my phone. It was 12 degrees. Snow was piled higher than the window on my interview. It was insane. But I went up there and it was a great opportunity. The school and the community, is so amazing. And I enjoyed every minute of it. And the coolest thing is that I was out of my comfort zone in the sense of like the culture shock. It was nothing like I had been raised in or being in the South. It was completely different, but it allowed me to grow as a person kind of going through those moments. And so, I love Northern Michigan. I love the girls there. I still to this day talk to the head coach. We're best friends. And so I will forever have a place in my heart for Northern Michigan.
I think that's interesting what you just touched on there, the fact that you got out of your comfort zone because you had basically lived in about a 3-4 hour radius in Tennessee your entire life until you head up there. When you look at opportunities as a player and as a coach, what advice would you give somebody that might not want to step out of their comfort zone, even if it does feel like the right move, but they might want to stay a little closer to home or something like that?
I encourage it wholeheartedly. Even my friends that haven't left our hometown or anything like that, I'm always like, you guys need to go and you need to live somewhere else. Because again, like there's nothing that you can experience like that unless you're stepping completely out of your comfort zone. Now, not everybody has to move 17 hours, 1,001 is exactly 1,001 miles away from my home that I had grown up in. So it was just, the distance was crazy, but I can't explain how much I grew in that time. And then even the other cool part is I met my husband. He was a coach at Middle Tennessee when I was there. And then he moved to Texas and I moved to Michigan. So we dated for 3 years distance. And so it was a crazy thing, but everything came back and we're married and it's all good.
Everything ended up working out, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Let's talk about Northern Michigan for a quick second, because your first year there, you go 21-8, 12-4 in the GLIAC. But you don't make the NCAA tournament. How talented is that league?
Man, it was kind of a shock because I would say the SAC in general, sorry if you hear my dog barking, by the way, but in general, the SAC is a very good conference. But when you get out of it, you don't realize what the caliber of talent are. Even in Texas, now where I'm at now, the caliber is ridiculous. And so it's the same with that region up there. We have probably 5 to 8 teams always in the top 25 ranked. And so that's who you're competing with every day. When I played, I don't think Brevard is even in the conference now. But yeah, when I was there, Brevard was like one of the lower teams who you go into the game, you knew you were going to beat. At Northern Michigan, that was not the case ever. And so it was just a really cool, the talent level was unbelievable. And that first year, we felt very robbed, like we should have gotten into the NCAA tournament. And so we were super upset about that. But again, it's just the talent level is crazy up there.
Perhaps one of the best in the entire region, if not the best. It seems like a national champion comes out of that region almost every single year. And then the second year that you're there, you beat the number 1 team in the country, Minnesota Duluth, the number 1 team in the nation. Nothing that is different for you, having beaten a top 10 team as a player in your career, but how would you describe being a coach at that point and seeing your team beat the top-ranked club in the nation?
Yeah, it's funny because me and Mike Lozier, so he came in and then I came in 2 or 3 months later. So and he was new as a head coach of a college program. So we were literally figuring it out. First year through, we just really had really good talent that allowed us to end where we were. I think the coach beforehand didn't have a good relationship with the team. And so really all we did was, and we even say this, we came in, we rolled the balls out and we were like, all right, play volleyball. And then they were just good enough to be able to do that. And then the second year we had, I think we had a right side. She was an All-American. We had a middle that was an All-American. They were just unstoppable and unbelievable. And so seeing that and seeing their hopes and the things that they've, like I did as a player, kind of come to fruition that last year that they played was just a really cool experience to see.
You're still second in Carson-Newman history in career assists. You're still third in career assists. Obviously had a wonderful career being an all-region pick. How challenging is it to go from being a player to a coach? Because as a player, if you hit a ball too hard or hit it out of bounds on a serve, or if your set's a little off, you know it, you can make that change. As a coach, you have to try to instill that upon a player that might not necessarily understand how to make that change. What is that like being a coach trying to make adjustments to younger players?
I think it's an evolving process. I don't think that I've still conquered it by any means. I would say my first few years of coaching, the best thing that I did as a coach was I could relate to the girls. And that's kind of what I brought to MTSU, also to Northern Michigan, because I was younger. I wasn't that far out of college. And so I was able to relate, and I'm, kind of talking about those memories that I've had playing in those tight matches, in those things. How can I best serve them in those moments? And so that's really what I tried to play on. But again, it's super hard. I mean, people know who are collegiate coaches. You're not just a college coach. You're a mentor. You're a psychologist. You're a babysitter. You're all these things. You're a teacher. You're all of these. And so it's just cool because you're around those girls 24/7 to be able to kind of live through that and going through it, and then also sharing my experiences and hopefully making them better, and kind of just walking that with them.
I think you just touched on something that I think is a pretty important topic, because you're not just a coach for a couple hours a day. You are, in essence, a chaperone, a life coach, everything in one. What is the biggest challenge that you've encountered by being a coach, not necessarily just at the college level, now at the club level? What's that biggest challenge for you?
Well, when I started out college coaching, I would be like, people would ask me like, oh, so what do you do? And I'm like, I'm a college coach. And they're like, okay, so what else do you do? And I'm like, are you kidding? It is more of a full-time job than any job I've ever worked. The biggest challenge, I think, for me, looking back now that I'm kind of somewhat out of the coaching world, is your emotions, your whole livelihood is put into whatever program you're at. If you want to be successful, I mean, you go home, you're watching film. You wake up, you're watching film. You're whether on your team or other teams. And that's what people don't understand. Now I work at what you call a 9-to-5 job. I love it. But when I leave work, I leave work. And college coaching is not like that at all. And so I kind of miss that in a sense, but I also value the time that I have when I am away from work. And so I think that's what people don't fully understand about college coaches, is that it's 24/7 all the time.
This might come as a shock, but you're a couple years away from a 10-year reunion potentially coming up, and a 10-year anniversary of your senior season and that great team that made it to the NCAA regional. Starting to remove yourself from the college life, what's it like now still being connected to a lot of your teammates? You mentioned the fact that both Lauren Santarelli and Rachel Harper are still located in Texas. What's it like now stepping aside, living far away from the campus that you once called home, and still being connected with so many different teammates that you have?
The coolest thing is just being able to see where we're at in our lives, and now some of us are married, some of us aren't married, some of us have kids, some of us don't have kids. Like, just living through that with all of my teammates, all of my friends, is the coolest thing. And again, like, we've gone through so much together. And so those bonds will never be broken, but also it's just to be able to still be in their lives to this day and seeing them date, get married, have kids, all of that. It's a cool process to be a part of. And that's what I value in my life as well. I'm in a different chapter. I just got married a year ago. And so it's new, but it's such a fun, different, evolving time of my life right now.
I'll get you out of here with this final question, because I'm sure a lot of the people that are either going to watch or listen to this are obviously going to be former teammates of yours, former players that you had coached, or even current Carson-Newman players, or players that are considering Carson-Newman. You've touched on it a few times about savoring some of the moments that you've had during your playing career. What's one big piece of advice or a couple pieces of advice that you would give to high school juniors, seniors, or current college athletes?
The biggest thing is be where your feet are. And that's a quote that I've heard, is wherever your feet are, be there. Don't be somewhere else. Don't be thinking of, whatever it is the next day that might happen, or the next week, or whatever. Like, be where you are, where your feet are all the time, as much as you can. Because what that does is that allows you to kind of savor those moments, those big moments, those anything like that. And then you can learn and grow from those. But if you're constantly thinking of like, well, or I wish I was here, or I wish we could win, or I wish whatever it is, then you're never truly going to be satisfied with where you are in this life right now. And so I think for high school and club and college and all of that level, I would say that to anyone is probably my biggest advice.
Kristin, this has been a blast. I'm glad we were able to catch up. Thanks so much, and best of luck with your next ventures.
Thank you.
She's Kristin Pickett. Now Kristen Davis, a former two-time All-South Atlantic Conference pick and an all-region setter for Carson-Newman Volleyball. I'm Michael Watring. Be sure to subscribe and hit the like button so more viewers can find this podcast. This has been episode 16 of Mossy Creek Conversations.